Yo, what's going on, guys? Seth Spartan here, nutrition, training, and hormone expert and Prometheus Pro bodybuilder with Prometheus HRT, the world's best testosterone and hormone replacement clinic. Use my code Spartan to save on either testosterone or HGH replacement therapy or peptides or Anavar, Anadrol, and the list goes on as long as you qualify. Guys, without any further ado, this is insulin unleashed like you've never heard it before. Guys, we're going to go through all the pros, unbiased, uncensored, absolutely everything you could ever want or need to know for that matter on insulin. Full list of pros. From there, we're going to jump on over into the cons. Talk about all of the cons with insulin and also possible cons that people are not talking about. And the same as the pros, this will be unbiased, uncensored, full list, full and complete list of cons for you guys. From there, we're going to drop down into dosage, talk about dosing for insulin and bodybuilding, athletics, etc. After we're done with dosage, we're going to jump down or jump across the board to any extra additional information that, plain and simple, guys, either people don't talk about in the first place or they don't know to begin with. So guys, without any further ado, I'm Seth Spartan. This is Insulin Unleashed, starting in the pros. Here we go. Pros. Insulin. Insulin is a 51 amino acid chain or sequence peptide hormone. What does this mean? This means that insulin is comprised of 51 amino acids arranged in a sequence or a chain, much like human growth hormone, which is a 191 amino acid sequence or chain. And also, we just talked about IGF-1, IGF-1 being a 70 amino acid chain or sequence, excluding when DAS or LR3 is added onto it. So insulin in base form is a 51 amino acid sequence. Now, comparing, just comparing the sequences to what? HGH and IGF-1, what do we see with insulin? Insulin being only 51 amino acid sequence compared to IGF-1 being what? 70 amino acids? And HGH being a whopping 191 amino acid chain. What do we see right away with insulin? We see that insulin is a more basic or a simpler hormone to make. So, and we see this in the real world, in the human body. It has more of a specific purpose than IGF-1, which IGF-1 has an extended factors of use in the human body as far as, splitting cells and causing growth, and also being a powerful amino acid shuttling hormone as well. We're going to talk about insulin and compare insulin to IGF-1, which we just did an Unleashed video on, so go watch that if you want all the information on IGF-1. Moving on to the pros. Insulin. We talked about what it is. Let's talk about the half-life. Insulin has a half-life either intravenously or when it is in the bloodstream after being naturally secreted. Insulin has a half-life of 5 to 10 minutes, guys. That's it. Insulin has a very, very short half-life of 5 to 10 minutes when it is taken either intravenously or when it is secreted naturally by your body's pancreas, more specifically the beta cells in the pancreas. Let's talk about the route which people are always taking insulin exogenously, all right? So we talked about the basic half-life. Let's talk about the sub-Q half-life with insulin. Insulin, sub-Q half-life. When you pinch the fat and you take insulin sub-Q, which is the most common route for diabetics and also for performance and bodybuilding, we are talking a half-life of 2 to 5 hours when taken sub-Q. So it is extended quite a ways out. Now, when we talk about HGH for a second, the reason I want to bring HGH into the mix is because you'll notice HGH, when taken intravenously or released by the brain, the half-life, it can vary, but the half-life is around half an hour, 20, 30 minutes. It can vary based on metabolism, genetics. But having said that, HGH's half-life is pretty short also when it's in the bloodstream, all right? Either, intravenous or being released by the body. And we notice with HGH, when HGH is taken sub-Q, what's the half-life? You're typically around 3 to 4 hours, sometimes out to 5, depending on the individual. But we see, so when we're talking about insulin, 51 amino acid chain and a much shorter half-life in the bloodstream, this also corresponds accordingly to the sub-Q half-life. Just interesting to note. Moving on in the pros with insulin. Insulin, and this is what you guys have all been waiting for, all right? Here we go. Insulin is a powerful nutrient shuttling hormone, period. No ifs, ands, or buts around it, all right? Again, giving credit where credit's due. Insulin is an extremely powerful nutrient shuttling hormone. Now, what do I mean by that? What nutrients is it shuttling? Primarily glucose and fat. All right, primarily glucose and fat. So when insulin is released naturally in the body in response to elevated blood sugar, or when somebody takes a shot of insulin, the primary powerful nutrient shuttling hormone activity is going to be directed towards glucose and fat. Now, this has to be said because we have some scientific research and literature on this. Insulin also, based on what we know in the latest studies, we know that insulin has a small shuttling effect with amino acids also. So not only does insulin shuttle glucose and fat, into different body tissues, pretty much almost every body tissue for that matter, but it also shuttles amino acids. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, because there's some people that say insulin doesn't build any muscle directly. It does not increase protein synthesis. That's what some people say. And other people say, insulin, is a great muscle builder. It directly increases protein synthesis. What is true? We're going to get right into it now. Insulin Unleashed, moving on to the pros. Insulin gives you larger, fuller, and more vascular muscles. Period. Has to be said. There's no argument here. All right. I hate insulin. I'm going to explain why and the cons and why I advise never using it and why it should never be used in bodybuilding. But I'm going to say it as it is in the pros, same as the cons. I'm going to lay out everything for you guys. And the truth about insulin is that insulin usage in bodybuilding, fitness, athletics is going to give you larger, fuller, more vascular muscles. Period. All right. Bottom line. Why is it going to give you larger and fuller muscles? Comes down to two words: glycogen storage. When you're taking exogenous insulin, timed around carb meals, using insulin as a performance enhancer, you're going to be able to super compensate or super fill out muscle glycogen stores in the body. So now, whether you're training biceps, triceps, whatever you're doing, legs, taking around the workouts at specific timings with the correct amount of carbs, you're just going to be able to super compensate more glycogen. You're going to be able to fill out completely full, and also arguably super compensate a little bit, especially combined with anabolic steroids and such. But the bottom line is that larger, fuller, more vascular muscles. The vascularity, larger and fuller, mainly corresponds to muscle glycogen stores, which we just talked about, and the super compensating effect. The more vascular muscles corresponds, yes, to that a little bit, but more so to insulin being able to increase total body water weight, weight in general for that matter, and also you're going to increase to some extent blood volume. So the thing is that, just by carrying more overall weight. So the thing is that you are going to still increase vascularity, and people who have taken insulin for performance use, they will in most cases attest to this. All right, moving on in the pros, where we already talked about larger, fuller, more vascular muscles. Now here's the big argument which people are going to be talking about with bodybuilding, fitness, and athletics. Let's address it. Larger, fuller, more vascular muscles, period. However, insulin is slightly anabolic. What do I mean by that? Based on what we know, all right? Now I'm laying out my position on the people saying insulin does not build muscle directly, and people saying it does. What's true? It falls somewhere in the middle, guys. Insulin, proven. Insulin is slightly anabolic in the sense that in studies, insulin increases, let me say that again, Insulin increases, absolutely increases protein synthesis. There is no argument here, all right? Unfortunately, for the people that say insulin does not build muscle directly, there's no argument here. It is proven that insulin directly increases protein synthesis. Why and how? By increasing uptake of amino acids through different routes. So the thing is that do you need tons of insulin to drive amino acids into muscles or to upregulate these pathways? No, you don't need much insulin. However, you do need some insulin, guys. And this is why, let's say I go and I eat a steak. Let's say I eat a big lean steak, right? If I go and I get a steak from the store and I eat a big lean steak all by itself, guess what's going to happen? Even though I've eaten no carbs, once the protein builds up in my bloodstream, guess what's going to happen? Insulin is going to spike up, guys. Insulin is going to spike up a little bit. And that insulin is going to help increase or upregulate those pathways which mediate amino acid storage. So the thing is that do you need a lot of insulin to build muscle? No, you absolutely do not. But you do need some to help shuttle or to upregulate those amino acid uptake pathways. All right. So the thing is that it's one of those things where let's say this for example. Let's say your body, every time you ate a steak, a lean steak, your body just spiked up insulin levels super high. Yeah, you're going to build muscle, but there's going to be a problem. Too much insulin, no carbs. What's going to happen? Your blood sugar is going to drop way down. But we see, guys, we don't. But the thing is, guys, we don't see that. We don't see that with meals. If you eat a big steak or you eat this or you eat that, blood sugar levels are going to, drop down a little bit because of the insulin release. But your body isn't releasing extremely high amounts of insulin. The only times we see this is when people are consuming whey protein. People consume a lot of whey protein, which is, I just want to put this out here, guys. Whey protein is not a natural form of protein. It's too fast acting. That's not found in nature anywhere. But when people consume a non-natural form of protein like whey protein, that huge spike drives also a big spike in insulin, and then your blood sugar crashes after. But when we're talking about eating meat or eating other proteins found in nature, we don't see that. So here's the bottom line, guys. Here's the bottom line to sum this up. I love giving you guys more information than you need to know because then you can make better choices. But here's the bottom line, guys. Insulin is slightly anabolic in the sense that it increases muscle protein synthesis to a small extent by upregulating pathways for protein synthesis, all right? So do you need a lot of insulin to build muscle? No, not at all. Do you need some insulin to build muscle? Yes, you do. All right, and I want to go on the record and state this, guys, is that if you have a good working pancreas, you're healthy, when you eat your carbs or you eat your steak or whatever you're doing, you're gonna already have sufficient, and by sufficient, I mean sufficient insulin to build muscle. So the thing is that if you take high doses of insulin all the time, are you gonna build more muscle? I would argue that the effects would be negligible, to say the least. Guys, moving on, let's talk about the studies from here. Now, this is what I've seen researching for this video, all right? Because like I said, there's differing opinions on this. This is what I've seen. There are studies on both sides of the fence that say, yes, insulin builds muscle. And then there's also some studies where, guess what? Clear as day, studies showing insulin builds muscle, increases protein synthesis. And then in some other studies, insulin builds no muscle. And by no muscle, I mean zero muscle. In one study they did, they gave people high amounts of BCAAs, round the clock. And basically what happened, I got to check if it was round the clock, but basically they elevated people's BCAA levels or amino acid levels in the bloodstream by giving them BCAAs, and they kept their levels high. And guess what happened? Regardless of giving them exogenous insulin, there was no muscle growth, no protein synthesis, so no increase in muscle protein synthesis. So it goes back to what I'm saying, where I'm saying, do you need some insulin to build muscle? Absolutely, because insulin helps increase those pathways, upregulate those pathways. So you do need some. Yes, you do. Do you need a lot? No, you don't. Guys, that's pretty much it on that. Moving on to the pros. Yeah, that was a lot of information. Moving on. Insulin. More size, period. Has to be said. Primarily, why? Because it's true. Guys, insulin is going to give you more size. You're going to be bigger. Like we already talked about, you're going to be larger, more full, more vascular muscles. But in general, if we're talking more muscle mass, more overall size, absolutely. Absolutely more size. You know, so being able to super fill out those glycogen stores and such and so forth. And also insulin is going to increase, size and not just muscle stores, but also other tissues. We'll talk about water weight in a little bit. But bottom line, guys, insulin, one of the pros, more size. And any bodybuilder, whether it's Dorian Yates talking about insulin or any other bodybuilders, when they start an insulin regimen, guess what? They gain 10, 15, some even 20 pounds. All right. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. So from there, let's answer the next pro. More, and by more, I mean more strength. Question mark. Do you get more strength with insulin? Yes, absolutely. You do get more strength with insulin. Why? Well, first off, like we just talked about, more weight, more size, more weight. All right. You're gonna be bigger. The bigger you are, the more weight you can move. If anybody has experienced squatting, we'll add a more shredded weight versus a heavier weight. You know what I'm talking about. So first off, more size, it's going to equal more strength. Number two, you're going to have more, typically, you're going to have more muscle glycogen, more supercompensated stores, or more supercompensated glycogen muscle stores. And this is going to also help you move more weight. So more strength, absolutely. Mostly directly correlated to the weight, but also some correlation to the glycogen stores themselves. Moving on to the pros. All right, the HGH argument. Here we go. This is what we're going to go to next. This is going to be fun. Now, here's the HGH argument. I ask you guys this. Why would you use insulin for all of these pros when you could use HGH instead and do it better? Why? Because you could get all of these effects plus some because of the conversion of HGH into IGF-1. All right? Go watch my video, IGF-1 Unleashed. I break down IGF-1, completely, fully to a large extent. But the thing is, guys, is that insulin does all of these, great effects in terms of bodybuilding, fitness, and athletics. But the biggest argument here is that, go watch my video, IGF-1 Unleashed, so you're not, what I'm talking about. But why would you use insulin for these things when you could use HGH, replacement? If you're 18 years old, you have good genetics, your HGH level is you're producing about 4 IUs of HGH total per day. So let's say you're doing HGH replacement, 4 or 5 IUs, either through Prometheus or some other clinic, or let's say you have a working pituitary, you're 40 years old or younger and you're doing CJC 1295 DAC. CJC 1295 DAC can make your pituitary release up to 12 IUs per day. Not recommending that. That is absolutely abusive, but the human body can produce all that HGH naturally. And if you go the CJC 1295 DAC route, it is way, way, way cheaper. Anyways, besides the point, I'm falling off the wagon a little bit here, but besides the point, guys, why would you use insulin for all these things when you could do HGH replacement or go slightly above where you were when you were 18 and use that conversion to IGF-1 to do all these things except better? That's my argument, and it's a very good argument that a lot of bodybuilders, I feel, are figuring out. So, moving on to the pros. This is a big pro. I hear people talking about this, but this is only a big pro because people are abusing human growth hormone. So this pro only is going to apply to some people. All right, last pro with insulin. Insulin can take the strain or stress, can take the strain off pancreas and the beta cells in particular. So we know that in the human body, we talked about insulin being a 51 amino acid chain or sequence. It's produced by the pancreas and specifically the beta cells in the pancreas. So blood sugar rises, beta cells basically punch out or release insulin into the bloodstream for systemic circulation to lower blood sugar and push it into different tissues. So here's the thing, guys. Insulin can take the strain or stress off the pancreas, namely the beta cells, when bodybuilders or when people are using high doses of HGH. Now, this is very, very, I don't even know if I have the word for it, but this is very sketchy in general, because my first thing that I would say to people, instead of having to bring in another drug, instead of having to bring in exogenous insulin to lower the damage you're doing from another drug, how about you just reduce, or how about you stop the abuse you're doing in the first place? This is completely wrong bodybuilder bro science garbage. And by garbage, I mean trash thinking. This is the kind of stuff that kills bodybuilders. All right, this is stupid thinking. Absolutely stupid thinking. So that's like saying, okay, we're causing a direct and dangerous side effect from one drug, so we better bring in another drug and continue the abuse train even farther, all right? I understand why people are doing this, but this is just plain and simple stupid, all right? There's so many things that you can do to increase insulin sensitivity. And also, how about bodybuilders stop taking, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20 IUs of HGH per day and driving themselves diabetic, all right? This doesn't make any sense to me. So, yes, so insulin can take the strain off the pancreas, namely the beta cells, when people are doing high doses of HGH. I'm just going to call it flat out abuse. Yes, you can do that, and bodybuilders have been doing this. They take high amounts of HGH, the blood sugar goes up from all the HGH, and obviously watch my HGH Unleashed video. One of the problems with taking high dose HGH is that you can keep driving HGH levels up, but eventually the liver can't turn out any more IGF-1. The liver can no longer convert there's too much HGH to convert into IGF-1 accordingly at that ratio. So you're capped out at IGF-1 production from the liver. You can't produce any more IGF-1, but HGH levels are still going higher because the person's abusing HGH. And what happens? It drives them into pre-diabetic or a diabetic situation because blood sugar keeps getting higher and higher, and the amount of IGF-1 is capped out. Your liver can't convert anymore. So what happens? IGF-1 is what's lowering the blood sugar increase from the HGH in the first place. And this is why they run into this stupid, idiotic problem in the first place, which they should just stop the HGH abuse. However, if somebody's not going to stop the HGH, the high-dose HGH abuse, then yeah, it would probably be better to take, a low-dose insulin in some form to lower that blood sugar down and take the stress off of their own pancreas, which is having to pump out insulin day and night. But guys, this is completely ridiculous. The problem is in the HGH abuse to begin with. Guys, we've covered all the pros with insulin, unbiased, uncensored. Hope you guys learned something. We're going to now move into the cons. Here we go. Cons with insulin, and there are many. Let's talk about the first and greatest con with what? Insulin. You guys already know what I'm going to say. Even before probably when you clicked on this video, you already could figure out that this would be in here. Insulin, biggest con is what? You guys already know. Hypoglycemia. The biggest con with insulin, short term and also long term for that matter, depending on what form of insulin you're taking, the biggest con is going to be none other than hypoglycemia or low blood sugar or low glucose levels. Now, from insulin, guys, please listen up. Listen to what I'm saying. From insulin, this can be anything from mild, moderate, or can kill you, all right, on the spot. There are many people which have died from taking too much insulin, not just bodybuilders. Many bodybuilders have died, I'm sure, from taking insulin. I've heard all these horror stories, but the bottom line is that many people have died from taking insulin, many in bodybuilding and also many in general. People take too much insulin who are prescribed it. Or I guess in a lot of places, I don't think you even need a prescription for insulin, which is, okay, I won't even get into the legality of insulin. But the bottom line, guys, is that insulin depending on how much you take, and not just how much you take, but here's the bottom line. Let's take bodybuilders, for example. Bodybuilders, some days you're doing more cardio, less cardio. Let's take dieting. Let's take dieting, because most of these problems occur when you're dieting. It's depending on the activity level of that person that day, depending on how much cardio they did, depending on how depleted they are, depending how much liver glycogen they have available. The liver is the emergency store of basically blood sugar in the human body. When your blood sugar gets too low when you're sleeping, the liver basically secretes blood sugar accordingly so that your blood sugar levels don't drop too low and you die. Right? That's the role of the liver. Now, what happens is when people are dieting too hard and they don't have liver glycogen stores, people are dieting too hard, people are doing too much. People have really high insulin sensitivity from, let's say you're doing a show prep. You're doing all this tons of working out, and insulin sensitivity's through the roof, and you're not eating enough carbs and stuff. You don't have any liver glycogen because you're depleted, and then people take too much insulin, they die. So the thing is that, both for bodybuilders and for normal people, hypoglycemia, even to the point of hypoglycemia killing you, is far too common. All right, this is the biggest danger with insulin use or abuse, and this is why I recommend nobody ever uses insulin for bodybuilding, fitness, athletics. I'm sure insulin abuse is also rampant in other sports, especially endurance sports too. I assume it's got to be, because you can pack in way more carbohydrates, super compensate glycogen stores if you've got to do a La Tour de France or something like that. However, the bottom line is insulin kills, and the reason is hypoglycemia, or your blood sugar drops too low when you sleep, or all these other problems. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And you could take 5 IU, 10 IU one day, and it's not a big deal. Take it another day not knowing your liver glycogen's depleted, and you could run into issues. I don't think it would kill you at that dosage, but you could have some pretty big problems with that. All right, guys. And if you don't believe what I'm saying here, go Google. You can Google bodybuilder insulin horror stories, and you can read about some very terrible stuff with insulin usage. So, all right, enough on that. Let's talk about insulin and gut distension. This is another big problem, except non-lethal problem. So with insulin usage or abusage, all right, what do we have? Gut distension. This is the famous pregnant bellies that you see bodybuilders with. Now, I already addressed the gut distension, the pregnant bellies, in regards to IGF-1, because IGF-1 absolutely has a role. However, this can be caused directly from insulin as well. Why? Fat storage. This is from fat storage. Insulin. Insulin has a very, very close effect to what? IGF-1, which is named what? Insulin-like growth factor. So the thing is that insulin and IGF-1 receptor sites are extremely similar. The only difference is that IGF-1 is going to stimulate growth, cell proliferation, and other things, and also drive amino acids at a rapid rate into whatever tissue, right? IGF-1 doesn't really do that. It only increases protein synthesis slightly, all right? But it's not a huge protein synthesis, amino acid driving muscle like IGF-1, all right? So, but anyways, we're talking about the fat storage. What does fat storage have to do with gut distension, huh? You're confusing me, Spartan. Basically, guess where you have a huge and extremely high concentration of IGF-1 receptor sites? All around what? The intestines, large and small intestines. All around the intestines, you have tons and tons of these IGF-1 receptor sites. So when people take tons and tons and tons of insulin, misuse or abuse, and even at lower levels continually, what's going to happen? They're going to store fat around their intestines, around their internal organs, which is going to do what? Give you a clue. Give you a nice big pregnant belly, all right? So this is where the gut distension is going to come from with insulin. With IGF-1, it's the same kind of thing, but it's through a different route. So go watch IGF-1 Unleashed. I talk about this at length. Let's talk about, moving on in the cons now, let's talk about this. Decreases in insulin sensitivity. Now this is notable, extremely notable, and much needed to talk about. Why? Why? Because insulin sensitivity is going to be your huge muscle driving center. This is going to be your corner piece or your core component to building muscle. For the people that don't understand or don't know what this is, what is insulin sensitivity? Insulin sensitivity refers to how much insulin is needed in your body, in your own body, to do what? Or another person's body for that matter. But insulin sensitivity is the amount of insulin needed, either produced by your body naturally or injected. How much insulin is needed to basically do what? Lower blood sugar a certain number of points. So here's the thing is, somebody with high insulin sensitivity is going to mean what? You only need a little bit of insulin, either produced by your body naturally or injected, to lower insulin levels a lot. High insulin sensitivity. Your body is very sensitive to the effects of insulin. Doesn't matter again if it's internal or exogenous. Think external injection. So I'll ask you guys, is high insulin sensitivity a good thing? Is high insulin sensitivity a good thing? Absolutely. High insulin sensitivity is one of the best things for building muscle. Higher insulin sensitivity means what? More calories stored into muscle tissue versus fat tissue. You're going to have more muscle, less fat, be leaner. You're also going to be healthier because your body doesn't have to produce as much insulin, and we're talking less water weight, bloat, everything. You're gonna be healthier in general, and also guess what? Higher HGH levels. So the thing is that insulin sensitivity, again, is the core piece of building muscle. So when you consume protein or when you consume carbohydrates, your body does not need anywhere near as much insulin to basically push either those amino acids or the blood sugar into muscle tissue. All right. So insulin sensitivity is a great thing, and people with higher insulin sensitivity are far more healthy, and from a longevity standpoint, can very strongly be argued they're going to live a lot longer. It's much more healthy to have a high insulin sensitivity, and I am probably a prime suspect of that because my insulin sensitivity is, in a lot of cases, through the roof. All right, it's very high. It's very high, and that's just from training, doing a lot of cardio, eating right, such and so forth, but a lot of it's genetic as well. So and I get low blood sugar just from having, a protein drink. Anyways, moving on in the cons. I had to talk about that. Or I gotta say why it decreases. We already talked about what insulin sensitivity is. Why does insulin itself decrease insulin sensitivity? Because once you start taking insulin, sorry, I was going to be talking at the same time I was doing that. I was swallowing, so it looked kind of weird when I did that without talking. Anyways, so the thing is we talked about what insulin sensitivity is. Why does insulin decrease insulin sensitivity? The reason insulin decreases insulin sensitivity in the first place is due to the simple fact that if you're having to take, you're taking the insulin every meal, you are not controlling, or your body is not controlling the amount of insulin it's getting per dosage, and you're always using more than what your body would typically release to super compensate those stores. So what's going to happen? More insulin, decreased sensitivity. It's just a result of more and more insulin, more and more insulin. So how do you increase insulin sensitivity? By basically not having as much in your system. And also, that's the easiest way. And also by doing what? More amino acids, less carbs. L-carnitine increases insulin sensitivity. So does IGF-1. So there's tons of things you can do to increase insulin sensitivity naturally too as well, guys. L-carnitine is one of the best ways though, and easiest ways. Sleeping more increases insulin sensitivity. Hard training, doing cardio, doing other things, even going in the sauna for a little bit increases insulin sensitivity. So the thing is, bottom line, if you're taking insulin for performance gain, for building muscle, for bodybuilding or athletics, by taking more insulin for a performance gain, guess what's going to happen? Sensitivity is getting driven down, and you're going to have to start taking more and more and more and more in most cases, unless somebody is doing other things to rope it in. So it's a slippery slope when talking about insulin. Moving on to the cons. This is a big one. This is a huge one. Hopefully you've been following me for this long. This is a huge con when talking about insulin. And guys, this is a con that Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia, brought up himself. What is it? Loss of cuts. You're going to be less cut. Loss of cuts and less definition. Dorian Yates talked about this at length. Dorian Yates talked about for a lot of his career using between 1 and 2,000 grams of anabolic steroids, including testosterone, during most of his career. All right. From there, Dorian Yates also used high amounts of HGH. He's open. He's honest about this. During this time, he talked about insulin use. He tried insulin use for, I forget how long it was, but he did some pretty long runs of insulin use. You can listen to Dorian Yates himself talking about his experience with insulin use and what happened. What did Dorian Yates say? You can go look up his videos on this. I'm just going to answer it directly. I'm just going to answer it, give you the short rundown. Dorian Yates said, when adding insulin onto high doses of anabolic steroids and also HGH, the first thing he noticed, he got way bigger, he got bigger, he got stronger. But one thing he noticed, he did not look as good. Dorian Yates said his physique was not as good on insulin. Why? He was bigger, a little bit stronger, but what's the problem? All of those cuts, those fine cuts, those details, he lost those. So in terms of muscle definition, getting ripped, shredded, having good cuts and definition, which Dorian Yates is, Dorian Yates is the definition of muscle definition. It ruined his physique. It really ruined his physique. And he talks about this, and he's open and honest. And props to Dorian Yates and other people who talk openly and honest about this. Insulin is a physique destroyer, all right? So that has to be said, period. And also, with insulin use or abuse, you're going to, just because of how insulin works, namely, arguably, to a strong extent, you're going to increase sub-Q water, and that's what I believe. One of the reasons too that he said all this. So, moving on to the cons, let's talk about high blood pressure. High blood pressure and possible kidney damage. Now, this is not as much a talked about side effect as some of the other stuff, but with insulin use and abuse, with insulin use or abuse, high blood pressure is extremely likely. Why? You're increasing body weight extremely rapidly, very quick. All right, we're talking about whether it's bloat, whether it's sub-Q water, bloat, an increase in blood volume, whatever, increase in muscle glycogen. You're going to weigh more, and you're going to have a lot more size immediately. One thing you're going to notice right away, increased high blood pressure with insulin use and abuse. And if you have high blood pressure for long enough periods of time, this basically destroys the nephrons. What are the nephrons? They're basically what filters out blood in the kidneys. All right, they look like tiny little bulbs. So what's going to happen is that high blood pressure, long periods of time, not taking care of, kidney damage. All right, let's see here. Moving on in the cons. Let's talk about edema and bloating. With insulin abuse or misuse, you are going to have edema or, an increase in water weight, bloating, sub-Q as well as total body. This is just how insulin works, and especially with insulin use and abuse, what do we see? People's faces look like, just swollen and big, and you can, if somebody's abusing a lot of insulin, they look like they're puffy, they're swollen, they're carrying a lot more water weight we've already been talking about the effects of insulin. It's not only going to super compensate and fill out muscle glycogen stores, you're going to be bigger and fuller, but you're also going to have, an increase in sub-Q water, you're going to have an increase in water weight overall. So, when talking about insulin use or abuse, edema, bloat, sub-Q, total body, all prevalent, all there. Moving on, heart and arteries. We know too, we have some evidence that insulin use and abuse can damage the heart and the arteries. Now, I don't know off the top of my head, or I don't know, where I can tell you guys flat out, this is how it is. It's because of plaque buildup, or it's because of atherosclerosis, or because of other things. I can't, at this point, I can't give that to you guys. However, we have some evidence that insulin abuse or misuse damages the heart and arteries. Now, whether this is only from high blood pressure alone, or whether it's from doing kind of a yo-yo thing with your blood sugar, which it very well could be. We know in diabetics have in most cases, diabetics have absolutely terrible, artery health. Why? Because they're doing this yo-yo with the blood sugar. Blood sugar goes up, goes down. This blood sugar goes up, goes down. When blood sugar gets too high, what happens to the artery walls, guys? Artery walls get damaged. Plaque can build up easier. So one of the problems we see, guys, is that with the heart and arteries, you have a good risk of possible damage with insulin abuse or misuse, not just due to high blood pressure, but also due to, blood sugar spiking up. Not dropping down so much, but when blood sugar is spiking up all the time, it's hitting a point before your next insulin shot and such and so forth, you're going to run into problems. All right, guys, that's it for the cons. I'm Seth Spartan. Let's talk about dosage, any extra additional information, and we're out of here. Dosage. Oh, you guys are going to love this one. Ready for this? Here's Seth Spartan's insulin dosage. None. There's my insulin dosage, all right? My professional recommendation and opinion to you, and again, check with your doctor before you do anything, but I think he'll agree with me here. No dosage, none, nada, for bodybuilding, nothing. I am not going to, give you guys, or even entertain the thought of giving you guys a dosage for insulin. Why? Because many people have died. Oh man, this board looks crazy. But the bottom line, guys, why is because many people have died from hypoglycemia, both in bodybuilding and out of bodybuilding. It's not safe. And, the thing is, I understand, diabetics, they don't have a choice. They, in most cases, or not in most cases, if somebody's got type 1, they really don't have a choice. They have to use insulin. But the thing is that, there's problems with this. There are big problems with this because they still are going to be doing what? In a lot of cases, they're going to be, they're playing, it's not a game for them, but they're being forced to play with fire, so to speak, all right? So even, there's plenty of diabetics which have big problems with hypoglycemia, unfortunately. So the thing is that, with bodybuilding, I understand there's some pros with insulin. I talked about all of them. There's some pros. But the thing is, you can get all of these pros, or almost all of them, with some HGH and doing it safely, right? And, you're not going to be as freakishly big and get the extreme amount of these pros, if you were doing, insulin, like commonplace bodybuilders do, a couple IUs per meal here and there and doing such and so forth. But the thing is, guys, is that, from all the cons we talked about, is it really worth it? No, it's really not. It's not worth it to use insulin ever. It's better to get your insulin sensitivity higher, rely on your own pancreas, and if your blood sugar is always riding up, there's a problem. You're doing something wrong, all right? In terms of training, exercise, your diet, your drugs, there's something wrong. So guys, that's Seth Spartan's dosage. None, nada, nothing. Let's finish up with any extra extra additional information, and we're out of here. Extra information. One word when it comes to insulin and bodybuilding, fitness, and athletics. You ready for this? What do you guys need to know? Insulin is trash. Oh boy, there's going to be a lot of people that don't like that. But I just plain and simple, I don't care. I don't care. Insulin's trash. In bodybuilding, it has no place. You know, you can get a little bit bigger. You can turn into a little balloon boy. You know, you can get a little bit bigger, turn into a balloon boy a little bit. You know, but the bottom line is that what is bodybuilding about? At the end of the day, when you go into a bodybuilding show, you're trying to be as big as possible and at the same time as lean and shredded as possible. So this insulin is, you know, that water weight from the insulin is, you know, if you keep it there when you're doing your bodybuilding show, it's going to hurt your physique, just like Dorian Yates talked about. And if you're only doing it in the off season to be a little bit more jacked, there's no point. You know, you can't take that water weight with you on stage, and if you do, it's going to hurt your physique. So, in terms of if we were talking powerlifting or strongman, you know, there would be maybe a slight argument with why insulin would help you for powerlifting and strongman. You know, I've talked about that. But in terms of bodybuilding, guys, it's going to hurt your physique. There's no point. So, in terms of bodybuilding, trash. Insulin is trash, should not be used. What else? It has no place or legitimate usage in bodybuilding. It's just plain and simple too dangerous. It's just plain and simple too dangerous. And even if you're doing extremely low doses of insulin, my logic would be, why? Why not just do HGH replacement or something over that and get all of the pros without these negative cons and do it better? Well, you might say, well, I could do that and plus a little insulin. Boom, my brain would explode. But this is the problem with bodybuilding, all right? So guys, I don't know how much more to say on this. I'm Seth Spartan. Stay safe, stay healthy. Do everything right, safely, legally through your doctor. Guys, you only have one body. You know, it's not like we can just burn one out, switch to the new one. Whatever you guys do, just be safe, be healthy. And if you're thinking about using insulin and bodybuilding to enhance your physique, I got a secret for you. Don't. Just don't, all right? Guys, Seth Spartan. This is Insulin Unleashed, and we are out of here.